first time Jack Harmon died, it felt like falling through ice. Cold, shocking, then strangely peaceful. Dying wasn't the problem. Coming back was the hell part. 15 years had passed since that day on Eridani 4, when his body lay perforated by energy weapons, his blood pooling beneath him on the alien soil. 60 minutes without a heartbeat, while Veldorian biotechnology worked its miracle. The natives called it the rebirth. Jack called it a cosmic joke. Now he stood on the porch of his isolated cabin, nestled in the foothills of the Crimson Range on the frontier planet Helios. The twin stars were setting, casting long shadows across the dusty landscape. His calloused hands gripped a mug of something that tasted almost like coffee, but wasn't. Just like everything else in his life now. Almost normal, but not quite. Damn fine evening, he muttered to himself, gray eyes scanning the horizon out of habit. 15 years of peace hadn't erased 20 years of war. His muscular frame still tensed at unexpected sounds, and his hand still reached for a weapon that wasn't there when startled. The scars that crisscrossed his rugged face had faded somewhat, but the ones inside remained fresh. He'd come to this backwater world to forget the title they'd given him. Haranert, the legendary warrior, in the battles that earned it. He'd come to forget how he'd turned against his own command when ordered to exterminate the Veldorians, a race whose only crime was having resources humans wanted. The message sphere sitting on his kitchen table had shattered that illusion 3 days ago. It had arrived via the monthly supply ship, its pearlescent surface inscribed with the flowing script of the Veldorian High Council. They had found him. After 15 years of hiding, they had tracked him down and cordially requested his presence at a ceremony on their homeworld. Cordially requested my ass, Jack growled, draining his not coffee. Inside his sparse cabin, he stared at the sphere, watching as it pulsed with soft light. He hadn't activated the full message yet. Didn't want to. Opening it would mean acknowledging it, and acknowledging it would mean making a decision. Fine, he sighed, pressing his thumb against the sphere's surface. A holographic image blossomed in his living room, a tall, dignified Veldorian male with the characteristic pale green skin and flowing white hair of his species. Ambassador Theron, one of the few Veldorians Jack had actually considered a friend during those dark days. Jack Harmon, the recording began, the alien's voice melodic despite the formal tone. The Veldorian people have not forgotten your sacrifice. When you turned against your own kind to save our civilization from extinction, you earned more than our gratitude. You earned our eternal respect. Jack snorted. Respect, as if that paid for the nightmares. The 15th cycle of remembrance approaches, Theron continued. The Council wishes to honor you properly, as befits the only human to ever earn the title of Haranert. A ship will arrive at the Helios outpost in 7 days. We hope you will accept our invitation. The message ended, leaving Jack alone with his thoughts in the fading light. 7 days. The ship would arrive tomorrow. Hell, he muttered, running a hand through his short, dark hair. He'd spent 15 years trying to forget who he was, what he'd done. The medals and honors they'd tried to give him after his miraculous recovery meant nothing. He'd walked away from it all, disappearing into the vastness of space. But maybe it was time to stop running, to face the past he'd been avoiding. And Jack moved to the old military trunk he kept locked beneath his bed. The biometric seal recognized his touch, opening with a soft hiss. Inside lay the uniform he'd sworn never to wear again, alongside the ceremonial blade given to him by the Veldorian High Priestess after his recovery. His fingers traced the intricate etchings on the blade's hilt. The Veldorians had their own demons to face. Their civilization had nearly been wiped out, not just by humans, but by the Krell, the third party in that bloody conflict, whose brutality had made even hardened human soldiers blanch. When Jack had discovered the Krell's plan to obliterate the entire Veldorian homeworld, he'd made his choice, turned against his command, warned the Veldorians, and fought alongside them in the final battle, a battle that had left him dead for 60 minutes. One last ceremony, he said to the empty room, then they can all go back to forgetting about me. Decision made, he began to pack. Dawn broke over the Crimson Range as Jack stood at the edge of the Helios outpost landing pad. The settlement was little more than a collection of prefabricated structures and a few permanent buildings, with the landing pad being its most impressive feature. A dozen other colonists milled about, their curiosity piqued by the imminent arrival of a Veldorian vessel, a rare occurrence on this backwater world. Jack had opted for civilian clothes, sturdy boots, worn cargo pants, and a simple jacket over a faded shirt. The ceremonial blade, however, was strapped to his thigh, hidden but accessible. Old habits. "That's them," someone called out, pointing to a glimmer in the sky that rapidly grew larger. The approaching ship wasn't what Jack had expected. Veldorian vessels were typically elegant, with sweeping organic lines that mimicked the architecture of their homeworld. This craft was angular, aggressive, with unfamiliar markings along its hull. As it descended, Jack noticed the enhanced weapon ports, not standard for a diplomatic vessel. "Something's off," he muttered, instincts from a lifetime of combat flaring to life. The ship settled onto the landing pad with a precision that spoke of military training rather than civilian piloting. When the boarding ramp extended, Jack's suspicions deepened. Instead of the traditional honor guard of 4 that typically accompanied Veldorian dignitaries, 8 heavily armored soldiers marched down in perfect formation, taking positions around the ship. Their armor was wrong too, darker with red accents rather than the traditional gold of the Veldorian Defense Force. Each soldier carried what appeared to be a modified pulse rifle, more compact and lethal looking than the standard issue Jack remembered. A murmur ran through the gathered colonists. They might not recognize the specific inconsistencies, but even civilians could sense when something felt threatening. Ambassador Theron emerged from the ship, flanked by 2 more guards. His traditional robes couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders, and his smile seemed forced as he approached Jack. "Hurrah, nerd," he said, bowing deeply. "It honors us that you accepted our invitation." "Ambassador," Jack replied with a nod, deliberately omitting the traditional Veldorian greeting. "Interesting escort you've brought." A flicker of something, warning, fear, crossed Theron's features before his diplomatic mask slipped back into place. The council insisted on appropriate security for such an honored guest. "Since when does the Veldorian Defense Force wear red insignias?" Theron's smile tightened. "Much has changed in 15 years, my friend. Perhaps we could continue this conversation aboard? The journey to Veldoria is long, and we have prepared quarters suited to your status." Jack glanced at the guards, noting their rigid posture and the way their hands never strayed far from their weapons. "And if I decided I'd rather stay on Helios after all? That would disappoint the council greatly." Theron's voice dropped. "They have gone to considerable lengths to prepare for your arrival." The implied threat wasn't subtle. Whatever was happening here went beyond a simple ceremony. "I see," Jack said, maintaining an outward calm while his mind raced through possibilities. "Then I wouldn't want to be rude." He followed Theron up the ramp, acutely aware of the guards falling into formation behind them. The interior of the ship was as modified as the exterior, more utilitarian than the elegant Veldorian designs he remembered, with security measures he didn't recognize integrated into the bulkheads. "Your quarters," Theron said, gesturing to a door that slid open as they approached. The room beyond was luxurious by any standard, plush furnishings, ambient lighting, even what appeared to be genuine artwork on the walls. A prison, no matter how gilded, was still a prison. "I trust you'll find everything to your satisfaction," Theron continued. "We depart in 30 minutes. The journey will take approximately 3 standard days." "Looking forward to it," Jack replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. When Theron and the guards finally left him alone, Jack immediately began a thorough inspection of his quarters. The door, as expected, locked from the outside. The communications panel had been disabled. The viewport was genuine, but reinforced with energy fields that prevented it from being breached. "Well, shit," he muttered, sitting on the edge of the bed. Whatever ceremony the Veldorians had planned, it clearly wasn't the straightforward honorary event he'd been led to believe. As the ship hummed to life beneath him, Jack felt the familiar sensation of pre-battle calm settling over him. 15 years of peace had been a good run, but it seemed the universe wasn't done with Harmon just yet. Jack had spent enough time in captivity to know how to exploit routine. By the second day aboard the Veldorian vessel, he'd mapped the guard's rotation schedule and identified the brief windows when surveillance in his quarters weakened, likely when systems were running diagnostics. During one such window, He pried open an access panel beneath the ornate wash basin in his private bathroom. Years of frontier living hadn't dulled his technical skills. Within minutes, he'd bypassed the security protocols on the ship's information network. "Let's see what you're really up to," he muttered, fingers dancing across the exposed circuitry. The data stream he managed to access was fragmented. Security classifications blocked most files, but what he found sent a chill through him. Tactical assessments, planetary defense simulations, casualty projections in the billions, and one word repeated throughout: Nexari. "Damn it all to hell," Jack whispered. The Nexari were the stuff of nightmares, a species so ancient and advanced that most considered them mythological. During the war, intelligence had uncovered evidence suggesting the Krell were merely proxies for these shadowy beings. The Nexari were rumored to harvest entire civilizations for reasons no one understood. Jack had seen fragmentary records of their handiwork, worlds stripped of all sentient life, left as barren husks. A notification flashed across his improvised terminal. Someone was approaching his quarters. Jack quickly restored the panel and had just settled into a casual position when Ambassador Theron entered, flanked by a single guard. "I trust your accommodations remain satisfactory?" Theron asked, his formal tone at odds with the tension around his eyes. "They'd be more satisfactory if I knew why I was really here," Jack replied, studying the ambassador's reaction. "The Nexari have returned, haven't they?" Theron's composure cracked momentarily. "How did you—" He stopped himself, glancing nervously at the guard before continuing. "Such matters are not for discussion in transit. All will be explained upon our arrival." "Cut the diplomatic crap, Theron. If the Nexari are back, every second counts. What does the Council want from me?" The ambassador's shoulders slumped slightly. "You were always perceptive, Harmon. Very well. 6 months ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected energy signatures matching historical records of Nexari vessels. 3 weeks ago, we lost contact with our colony on Paradea. And you waited until now to prepare a response? The Council was divided on how to proceed. Some believed appeasement might be possible." Jack snorted. "You can't appease something that sees you as livestock." "Indeed, which is why others advocated for a more symbolic approach." Theron's gaze was steady now. "The legends of Harmon have grown in your absence. Stories of the human who died for 60 minutes and returned to save an entire civilization. Some believe you are touched by destiny." "I'm touched by something, all right," Jack muttered. "So what? I'm supposed to be your mascot, rally the troops with my miraculous resurrection story?" "Not exactly." Theron hesitated. "There is a ceremony planned, yes, but its purpose is more practical than honorary." The pieces clicked into place. "The biotechnology that saved me. You've developed it further." Theron nodded. "The process that revived you has been refined into what we call the Lazarus Protocol. It can enhance a warrior's physical capabilities, accelerate healing, even temporarily suspend death. But it requires a genetic template, a compatible host who has already undergone the original procedure." "Me," Jack said flatly. "You are the only one who survived the original process. Your DNA contains markers that could help stabilize the protocol for wider application." Jack paced the room, mind racing. "So you need my blood, my tissue samples?" "That's why the armed escort. I'm too valuable to risk losing." "The situation is more complex," Theron replied. "The Lazarus Protocol requires synchronization with your living neural patterns. Samples alone are insufficient." "What aren't you telling me, Theron?" The ambassador's gaze dropped. "The full procedure will be explained upon arrival." "I've already said more than I should." Jack stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If the Nexari are coming, I want to help, but I need to know what I'm walking into." "You will be treated with the utmost respect," Theron said, backing toward the door. "The Council has authorized me to inform you that we arrive at Veldoria tomorrow. Please prepare yourself for the welcome ceremony." After Theron departed, Jack returned to the hidden access panel. With renewed determination, he dug deeper into the restricted files, searching for information on this Lazarus Protocol. What he found made his blood run cold. The process wasn't just about enhancing warriors. It was about creating a neural link between a prime subject and multiple recipients. His mind would essentially be copied, his combat instincts and tactical genius replicated across an elite fighting force. The files contain no information about what happened to the prime subject afterward. As the ship began its approach to Valdoria, Jack stood at the viewport, watching the blue-green world grow larger. 15 years ago, he'd nearly died protecting this planet and its people. Now they needed him again. But at what cost? Whatever game the Valdorian Council was playing, Jack was determined to rewrite the rules. Valdoria's capital city of Luminara sparkled beneath Jack as the ship descended through wispy clouds. The elegant spires and sweeping arches he remembered had been joined by new, more angular structures, military installations poorly disguised as civic buildings. Jack had been provided formal attire for the ceremony. A midnight blue suit cut in Valdorian style but tailored for human proportions. The fabric shimmered subtly, embedded with microscopic lights that mimicked the constellation patterns sacred to Valdorian culture. A clever touch, dressing him as both outsider and honored guest simultaneously. Ambassador Theron escorted him from the landing pad through a series of grand plazas. Crowds of Valdorians lined the route, their pale green faces turned toward him with expressions ranging from awe to curiosity. Children pointed, whispering the legendary title, Harmon! The council awaits in the Hall of Remembrance, Theron said, gesturing toward a massive structure of gleaming white stone. They are eager to proceed with the ceremony. I bet they are, Jack replied, keeping his voice low. Before we get there, I want to propose an alternative approach to your Nexari problem. Theron's steps faltered. This is hardly the venue for... I'm not going to be a lab rat, Theron, but I will help, on my terms. I want a direct audience with the High Council. No ceremony, no bullshit, just straight talk about real options. The ambassador's luminous green eyes widened. You would defy the council's wishes after they've prepared this welcome? I'd rather defy them than be dissected by them, Jack said flatly. Your choice. Either I speak to them as an equal, or I make a scene your people won't forget. Conflict played across Theron's features before he nodded reluctantly. I will arrange it, but first, protocol demands you at least appear at the ceremony. To do otherwise would cause confusion. Jack recognized the compromise for what it was. Fine. Ceremony first, then private audience. Deal? Deal, Theron agreed, relief evident in his voice. The Hall of Remembrance was packed with Valdorian nobility and military officials. Jack was led to a dais at the center, where 7 robed figures, the High Council, waited in ornate chairs. The ceremonial proceedings began with traditional chants and the recounting of Jack's exploits during the war, embellished to near mythic proportions. Jack barely listened, his attention caught by movement at the far end of the hall. A procession was approaching, guards in formal armor surrounding a slender figure in an elaborate gown of silver and gold. As they drew closer, Jack felt his breath catch. The female Valdorian they escorted was stunning even by the standards of her graceful species. Her pale green skin seemed to glow from within, contrasting with cascading hair, the color of fresh snow. Unlike the typical luminous green eyes of her race, hers were a piercing bright blue, marking her as a member of the royal bloodline. Most shocking were the delicate chains binding her wrists, connected to silver cuffs that gleamed against her skin. The High Counselor's voice boomed across the hall. Haranert, savior of Valdoria, we present to you Princess Eliana, daughter of the royal house. In accordance with our most sacred traditions, she is offered as bond companion to one who has proven himself worthy through sacrifice. Jack's jaw tightened as the princess was brought to stand before him. Her expression remained composed, regal despite her bonds. But when their eyes met, he saw the silent plea behind her dignified facade. Be careful, human, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Something's terribly wrong here. Jack turned to the High Council, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent hall. I appreciate the honor, but I don't accept unwilling gifts. Remove her chains. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The High Counselor's face darkened. The chains are symbolic, Haranert. They represent the sacred bond between... I said remove them, Jack interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. Now, or this ceremony ends." After a tense moment, the counselor nodded to the guards. As the chains fell away, Princess Eliana rubbed her wrist, a flash of gratitude crossing her features. "Thank you," she said softly, her accent making the simple words sound musical. "Now," Jack continued, addressing the council directly, "I understand the Nexari have returned. I'm willing to help, but not as a test subject for your Lazarus protocol. I demand a private audience to discuss alternatives." Gasps echoed through the hall. The council members exchanged alarmed glances, clearly unprepared for his knowledge of their classified plans. "How dare you make demand?" began one counselor, but the central figure, a white-haired elder, raised a hand for silence. "Perhaps," the elder said carefully, "we have underestimated you, Haranerd. Very well, a private audience will be granted. Until then, Princess Eliana will serve as your guide and host." Jack caught the subtle exchange of glances between the princess and the elder. There was more happening here than appeared on the surface. As the ceremony concluded and the crowds dispersed, Eliana led Jack through a side passage. Once they were alone in a small antechamber, her composed demeanor shifted to urgent intensity. "They never expected you to refuse me or demand my chains be removed," she said, checking to ensure they weren't overheard. "You've disrupted their plans, but only temporarily." "What exactly are those plans?" Jack asked. "Beyond using me as a template for their Lazarus protocol?" Eliana's bright blue eyes met his. "The Nexari threat is real, but the Council's response is madness. The protocol doesn't just copy your combat abilities, it would bind your consciousness to theirs. You would experience every death, every wound inflicted on the linked warriors. Hundreds of deaths over and over." "Hey," Jack muttered. "And you? What's your role in all this?" "I oppose the protocol. My royal status made me inconvenient." Her lips curved in a bitter smile. "Offering me to you solved two problems at once. Silencing my opposition while securing your cooperation through traditional means." Jack felt a surge of admiration for her courage. Despite her delicate appearance, there was steel beneath. "Well, they miscalculated on both counts." "Indeed they did," she replied, something warming in her gaze as she studied him. "Perhaps the legends of Haranerd weren't so exaggerated after all." The private chambers assigned to Jack were opulent by any standard. A suite of rooms in the east wing of the royal palace, overlooking Luminara's shimmering central lake. As night fell, the city's bioluminescent architecture cast an ethereal glow across the water. Princess Eliana had arranged for secure privacy measures, activating ancient protocols that even the council's surveillance couldn't penetrate. Now she paced the room, her elegant gown from the ceremony replaced by a simpler outfit that nonetheless accentuated her lithe figure. "The Nexari aren't simply returning," she said, spreading holographic documents across a table. "They're being summoned." Jack leaned over the display, examining intercepted communications and energy signature readings. "By whom? And why would anyone want to bring those monsters here?" "By High Counselor Renix and his faction." Eliana's blue eyes flashed with anger. "The same ones who developed the Lazarus protocol. They believe they've found a way to control the Nexari using the same technology that saved your life." Jack's mind raced, connecting pieces of a puzzle he hadn't realized existed. The resurrection technology. They think they can use it as a weapon? More than that, they believe they can harness the Nexari's ability to absorb consciousness. Her voice dropped. "When you died for those 60 minutes, your consciousness didn't simply disappear. The doctors who revived you reported anomaly. Your brain patterns contain fragments of something else, something not human." "I don't remember any of that," Jack said, though a chill ran through him. Those first weeks after his revival had always been hazy in his memory. "You wouldn't. They suppressed those memories during your recovery." Eliana touched his arm gently. "But Renix believes your temporary death created a bridge. A neural connection to the Nexari collective consciousness. He thinks the Lazarus protocol can exploit that connection, using you as a conduit to control them." "That's insane," Jack growled. "You can't control the Nexari. They're not just aliens, they're something else entirely." "I know, but Renix has convinced enough of the council that it's possible." She hesitated. "There's more. The attack on our colony wasn't random. Renix deliberately weakened their defenses. a sacrifice to draw the Nexari closer. Jack's jaw tightened. Thousands of lives. Millions more will follow if he succeeds in bringing them here. Eliana's fingers trembled slightly as she organized the evidence. We need to expose this conspiracy before our audience with the council tomorrow, but we also need a viable alternative to defend against the Nexari. I might have something, Jack said, moving to the table and clearing the holographic displays. During the war, I studied every encounter with the Nexari proxies. They have weaknesses, not many, but enough. He began sketching a tactical plan, drawing on his years of combat experience and the intelligence Eliana had provided. As they worked, the distance between them gradually diminished, their shoulders touching as they leaned over the plans. This could work, Eliana said, her voice filled with growing excitement. A coordinated defense using modified pulse barriers at these junction points would disrupt their hive mind communication. Combined with targeted EMP strikes here and here, Jack added, his finger tracing patterns across the display. We don't need to destroy them all. Just fragment their collective consciousness enough to force a retreat. Their eyes met across the table, mutual admiration evident in their gaze. Jack became acutely aware of her proximity, the subtle floral scent that seemed to emanate from her skin, the way her snow-white hair caught the room's ambient light. You're remarkable, she said softly. The legends didn't do you justice. I could say the same about you, he replied. Not many princesses I know would risk everything to stop their own government's conspiracy. A smile played at her lips. How many princesses do you know, Harmon? Fair point. He returned her smile, feeling something shift between them. Tension transforming into a different kind of energy. Eliana moved closer, her bright blue eyes searching his. In Veldorian culture, warriors who face death together share a bond that transcends ordinary connections. We have a term for it. Calith Varan. Soul forged. We have similar concept, Jack said, his voice rougher than he intended. Brotherhood in arms. It goes deeper than that. Her hand rose to trace the scar that ran along his jaw. When you died those 60 minutes, part of your essence touched something beyond our understanding. It changed you. I can sense it. Jack caught her hand in his, surprised by its warmth. Veldorians typically ran cooler than humans. And what do you sense? That you carry more than just your own life within you. Her gaze was intense, almost luminous in the dim light. That perhaps you were meant to return here now, when we need you most. The space between them seemed charged with electricity. Jack had known attraction to alien species before. The galaxy was full of compatible biologies, but this felt different, deeper, as if something in him recognized something in her. I don't believe in destiny, he said, though his body was telling him otherwise as he drew her closer. Neither did I, Eliana whispered, her lips now inches from his. Until today. Their first kiss was tentative, exploratory, the meeting of two species with similar but not identical customs. The second was anything but hesitant. Heat bloomed between them, a connection that seemed to transcend the physical. Later, as they lay entwined in the darkness, the bioluminescent city casting patterns across their skin, Eliana traced the regenerated tissue over his heart, where the fatal wound had once been. For 60 minutes you were gone, she murmured. Where did you go, I wonder? Jack had no answer, only the lingering sensation that their joining had awakened something dormant within him. Memories or impressions from those lost minutes when he had hovered between life and death. Whatever revelation awaited in those forgotten moments would have to wait. Tomorrow they would face the council with both their evidence and their alternative strategy. Tonight was for forging a different kind of alliance, one that might prove just as crucial in the coming battle. Jack awoke to blaring alarms and the room bathed in pulsing red light. Beside him, Eliana was already sitting up, her snow-white hair cascading over her bare shoulders as she reached for a communication panel embedded in the wall. What's happening? She demanded, her royal authority evident even in her state of undress. High alert, Your Highness, came the panicked response. Unknown vessels have breached our outer defense grid. Configuration matches Nexari's signatures. Jack was already moving, pulling on his clothes with practiced efficiency. Renix, he growled. He's accelerated his timeline. The council chambers have been locked down, the voice continued. High Counselor Renix has enacted emergency protocols. He's calling for immediate implementation of the Lazarus Protocol. Uliana's eyes met Jack's, fear and determination mingling in their bright blue depths. He knows we're on to him. He's forcing a crisis to justify using you. The floor trembled beneath them as something impacted the city's shields. Through the panoramic windows, Jack could see energy barriers flickering over Luminara, geometric patterns of light struggling to hold against unseen forces. In the distance, dark shapes descended through the atmosphere. Nexari vessels, their organic, mechanical, hybrid forms unmistakable even at this distance. We need to implement our defense plan now, Jack said, strapping on the ceremonial blade he'd been given, with or without council approval. Eliana was already accessing the secure terminal, her fingers dancing across the interface. I can override some defense systems using royal protocols, but we need access to the central command hub to implement the full strategy. Another impact shook the building. The shields outside flared brightly before sections began to fail, creating gaps in the city's protection. Where's the command hub? Jack asked, checking the blade's edge with his thumb, still sharp. Beneath the council chambers, but with a lockdown? There's always another way in, Jack said, with the confidence that had made him legendary. Especially if you have a princess with override codes. Eliana's lips curved into a smile despite the danger. I knew there was a reason I was drawn to you. The intensity of their shared night lingered between them. The unexpected depth of their connection. The way their bodies had seemed to recognize each other despite their different species. Something profound had awakened in Jack during their intimacy. Fragments of memory from his 60 minutes of death struggling to surface. There was no time to explore those revelations now. They dressed quickly and slipped into the corridor, finding it in chaos as palace staff and guards rushed to emergency positions. This way, Eliana said, leading him down a service passage. There's a maintenance tunnel that connects to the lower levels of the council building. They moved swiftly through the palace's hidden infrastructure, encountering few others in the narrow utility corridors. Through occasional windows, Jack glimpsed the city under attack. Nexari vessels now visible in the sky, their strange geometries defying conventional aerospace design. Smaller craft detached from the larger ships, descending toward the gaps in the shields. Renix is letting them in, Jack realized aloud. He's creating deliberate vulnerabilities in the defense grid. To demonstrate the need for his solution, Eliana agreed grimly. He'll sacrifice thousands to justify using you as a conduit. They reached a security door that Eliana quickly bypassed with her royal codes. Beyond lay a narrow bridge spanning a deep chasm, part of the city's ancient infrastructure from before the modern buildings had been constructed atop it. Halfway across, a violent tremor shook the bridge. Jack caught Eliana as she stumbled, pulling her against him as sections of the ceiling collapsed behind them. That was too close, she breathed, her body pressed against his. Story of my life, Jack replied with a grim smile. The warmth of her against him brought back vivid memories of the previous night, the surprising heat of her skin against his, the way she'd whispered his name in the darkness. Focus, he told himself. The fate of an entire civilization hung in the balance. They continued through the maintenance tunnels until they reached the foundations of the council building. Here, Eliana led them to a service elevator that would take them directly to the command hub. This requires both royal authorization and council clearance, she said, frowning at the security panel. Can you bypass it? Not without triggering alarms. She bit her lip, thinking. But there might be another way. The resurrection technology that saved you, it left traces in your biochemistry. Renix's files indicated your cellular structure now contains markers similar to council genetic signatures. You think the system might recognize me as having clearance? It's worth trying. Place your hand here. Jack pressed his palm against the scanner, feeling a slight tingling as it analyzed his genetic makeup. After a tense moment, the panel flashed green and the elevator door slid open. I'll be damned, he muttered. The same technology they want to use against you just gave us access, Eliana said with a hint of irony as they stepped inside. The elevator descended rapidly, bringing them to a vast chamber filled with holographic displays and control stations. Most were unmanned, the regular operators likely evacuated during the attack. At the center stood a circular platform where a three-dimensional model of Luminera and its defenses hovered, sections flashing red as they failed. "There," Jack said, pointing to a control station. "We can implement our defense strategy from there." They rushed to the terminal, Eliana quickly bypassing the security, while Jack prepared the tactical parameters they developed. Above them, the holographic display showed more Nexari vessels breaching the atmosphere. "We need to hurry," Eliana urged, "and once they establish a foothold..." The elevator doors slid open, and they turned to find High Counselor Renix standing there, flanked by 4 guards with weapons drawn. "I thought you might find your way here," Renix said, his aged face twisted in a cold smile. "Your predictability is almost disappointing, Her Honor." "Call off your attack, Renix," Jack demanded. "Your plan to control the Nexari won't work." "You understand nothing of what I've achieved," Renix replied, stepping forward. "The Nexari aren't our enemies. They're our evolutionary future, the next step in consciousness." "They're parasites," Eliana countered. "They consume sentient life." "They transcend it," Renix corrected. "And you, Her Honor, you've already touched their collective. Your 60 minutes of death connected you to something greater than yourself. Now you'll help us all achieve that connection." Jack positioned himself protectively in front of Eliana. "Not going to happen," Renix sighed. "Guards, secure them both. Prepare the Lazarus chamber." As the guards advanced, the building shuddered violently. The holographic display flickered, showing a massive Nexari vessel now hovering directly above the council building. "Perfect timing," Renix said, looking upward with an almost reverent expression. "Our ascension begins now." "Secure them," Renix ordered, his voice rising with fanatical intensity as the guards advanced. The command center doors slid open again, and Ambassador Theron burst in with a contingent of royal guards, their weapons trained on Renix's men. "Stand down by order of the Elder Council," Theron commanded. Renix's face contorted with rage. "You dare interfere with Ascension? The Nexari will elevate us beyond—" "They'll consume us," Theron cut him off. "I've seen the evidence. Your Ascension is extinction dressed in religious fervor." The momentary standoff gave Jack the opening he needed. As the two Veldorian factions faced each other, memory suddenly flooded his consciousness, triggered by the proximity of the Nexari vessel above them, and the lingering neural connection from his night with Eliana. In a rush of clarity, Jack remembered his 60 minutes of death. He hadn't simply ceased to exist, and he'd been somewhere else, within the Nexari collective consciousness, observing their vast hive mind from inside, and they had been afraid of him. "Eliana," he whispered urgently, "I remember now. The Nexari, they can absorb most sentient consciousness, but human minds resist them. Something about our neural patterns disrupts their collective." Her eyes widened. "That's why they never directly attacked human worlds. And why they use the Krell as proxies," Jack finished. "They fear us." The building shuddered again as the massive Nexari vessel began drilling through the upper levels. Debris rained from the ceiling as structural supports strained. "We need to implement our defense plan now," Eliana said, turning back to the terminal. "It won't be enough," Jack realized. "Not with them already here. I need to establish direct contact." "What are you suggesting?" Theron asked, joining them while his guards maintained the standoff with Renix's forces. "The Lazarus chamber," Jack said grimly. "Renix was right about one thing. I have a connection to them, but he was wrong about how to use it." Eliana gripped his arm. "You can't. The chamber might kill you permanently this time." "I don't need to die," Jack explained, the plan forming as he spoke. "Just get close enough to the threshold to reestablish the connection. Then we broadcast that connection through your defense grid, not to control them, but to disrupt them." "Blasphemy!" Renix shouted, lunging forward only to be restrained by Theron's guards. "The Nexari are our evolutionary destiny." "They're predators," Jack countered, "and humanity is the one prey they can't digest." Another violent tremor shook the chamber. The holographic display showed the Nexari vessel had breached the council building's upper levels. Smaller entities were now emerging, shadowy, semi-corporeal forms that seemed to shift between states of matter. "We need to move now," Theron urged. "The Lazarus chamber is 2 levels below us." "I'll need to modify it first," Eliana said, already downloading schematics to a portable device. "And we'll need access to the broadcast array." Jack turned to Theron. Can you hold them off long enough? The ambassador nodded grimly. For Veldoria. As they rushed toward the emergency stairwell, Renix broke free from his captors and lunged at Jack with surprising strength for his age. You will not deny us the transcendence. Jack sidestepped the attack, but Renix managed to grab Eliana, pressing a ceremonial dagger to her throat. The chamber is mine to command. In one fluid motion, Jack drew his blade and struck, not at Renix, but at the control panel beside him. Sparks erupted, momentarily distracting the High Counselor. It was all the opening Eliana needed. She drove her elbow into his solar plexus and twisted free, her royal combat training evident in every movement. You fight well for a princess, Jack remarked as they raced down the stairwell. And you're surprisingly chivalrous for a legendary warrior, she replied with a flash of a smile despite the danger. They reached the Lazarus Chamber, a circular room dominated by a central platform surrounded by arcane technology that blended ancient Veldorian symbolism with cutting-edge science. Eliana immediately began reconfiguring the systems while Jack secured the door. How long? He asked. Minutes, she answered, her fingers dancing across the controls. The chamber was designed to extract and replicate neural patterns. I'm reversing it to project instead. Jack joined her at the control panel, following her instructions to reroute power from secondary systems. Their hands brushed, and despite the crisis, electricity sparked between them, the echo of their night together still resonant in their bodies. About last night, Jack began. Save it for when we're not facing extinction, Eliana replied, though her eyes softened. Though I wouldn't mind a repeat performance. Deal. The chamber hummed to life as the modifications were completed. Above them, the sounds of battle intensified as Theron's forces engaged the Nexari entities. It's ready, Eliana announced. But Jack, this will bring you dangerously close to death again. The connection forms most strongly at the threshold. Some risks are worth taking, he said, cupping her face gently. I died for Veldoria once. I'm willing to risk it again. Her bright blue eyes shimmered with emotion. Just promise you'll come back this time too. Count on it, he replied, sealing the promise with a kiss that carried all the intensity of their connection. Human and Veldorian, yet something transcending both. Jack stepped onto the platform as Eliana initiated the sequence. Energy fields enveloped him, and he felt his consciousness begin to separate from his body. Not fully detached, but stretched thin like a membrane between worlds. And then he was there again, within the vast alien consciousness of the Nexari collective. Billions of absorbed minds swirled in a cosmic maelstrom, individual identities subsumed into the greater whole. But this time, Jack wasn't a passive observer. His human consciousness stood distinct, resistant to absorption. Through the tenuous connection Eliana maintained, he projected his presence outward, not just his mind, but the fundamental pattern of human neural architecture. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Nexari collective recoiled, its unified consciousness fragmenting as the human pattern acted like a virus within their system. In the physical world, the Nexari vessel above Luminara shuddered and began to withdraw. The shadowy entities infiltrating the city dissolved, unable to maintain cohesion as the disruption spread through their network. Jack felt himself being pulled back into his body as the Lazarus chamber cycled down. He gasped, lungs burning as if he'd been underwater, to find Eliana leaning over him, tears tracking down her pale green cheeks. Did it work? He managed to ask. See for yourself, she said, helping him to his feet and gesturing to a monitor, showing the skies above Luminara. The next three vessels were retreating, their formations chaotic and disorganized. They're running from us, Theron said incredulously as he entered the chamber. From one human? From humanity, Jack corrected. Our minds are naturally resistant to their collective. They can't process our neural patterns without fragmenting their own consciousness. You've saved us again, Harmon, Theron said with reverence. This time, I didn't have to die for 60 minutes to do it, Jack replied with a weary smile, his arm around Eliana's waist. In the days that followed, the full extent of Renix's conspiracy was exposed. The High Counselor and his supporters were removed from power, and a new defensive strategy was implemented based on Jack's discovery, broadcasting simulated human neural patterns as a shield against future Nexari incursions. 1 month later, Jack stood on the balcony of the royal palace, watching the twin moons rise over Luminara. The city had largely recovered, its resilient architecture repaired, and its people returning to normal life. Contemplating another disappearing act? Ileana asked as she joined him, her arm sliding around his waist from behind. Actually, he said, turning to face her, I was thinking about staying. Her bright blue eyes widened. You'd remain on Veldoria. I've spent 15 years running from who I am, Jack said, taking her hands in his. From what happened here, maybe it's time I stopped running. And what would the legendary Haranert do on a peaceful Veldoria? She asked, a smile playing at her lips. I was thinking royal consort has a nice ring to it, he replied. If the princess would have me. Eliana's answer came not in words but in a kiss that promised a future neither of them had imagined possible when she'd been presented to him in chains just weeks before. As they embraced beneath the alien stars, Jack reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here, from enemy soldier to savior, from death to life, from isolation to love. He had died for 60 minutes protecting these people 15 years ago. Now he would live for them and for her, for all the years to come. 5 years after the Nexori retreat, the royal palace of Luminara glowed with celebration. Citizens gathered in the central plaza to witness the naming ceremony of Crown Princess Lyra, daughter of Princess Eliana and her human consort, Jack Harmon. The child, with her mother's pale green skin and her father's determined gray eyes, represented something unprecedented. The first human Veldorian royal heir. The medical impossibility of their conception had been overcome through the same technology that had once saved Jack's life, coming full circle in the most beautiful way. As Jack held his daughter beneath the twin moons, Ambassador Theron approached with a small ceremonial box. The council thought it fitting, Theron said, opening the container to reveal a medallion inscribed with ancient Veldorian script. What does it say? Jack asked, though he recognized the craftsmanship from the blade he'd once carried. 60 minutes of death brought one life back, Eliana translated, standing beside her family. 60 years of life will bring millions forward. Jack smiled, watching the stars reflect in his daughter's curious eyes. He had once died for 60 minutes to save a civilization. Now he would live for decades to help it thrive. No longer the legendary Haranert who had returned from death, but simply a man who had finally found something worth living for.